Attention, soldiers, you are now entering the war zone. Please keep close to your compatriots and have your weapons at the ready. If you would like to skip the introduction, please fast forward to about 7.5 minutes. And now, poets at war.
Once, there were 4 children, whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy.
Suppose I'm writing a novel. I write, Mary laid down her book. Next moment came a knock at the door. For Mary, who's got to live in the imaginary time of the story, there's no interval between putting down the book and hearing the knock. But I, her creator, between writing the first part of that sentence and the second, may have gone out for an hour's walk and spent the whole hour thinking about Mary.
We make things by the law in which we are made. We create because we are created.
In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit.
One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all in the darkness bind them.
Tolkien and Lewis, both in their way, lifted me out of this world to show me a thundering beauty. And when I read the last sentence and came tumbling back to earth, I could still hear the peal. I hear it to this day. God allowed those stories to lift the veil on the imaginary world to show me the real world behind it, which ended up being, in the end, the one I was already in. The real world, at least in part, isn't out there somewhere, nor is it in my mind. It's here, right under my feet, all around me. Tolkien and Lewis held the fabric of Narnia or Middle-earth in one hand and clutched our world in the other, building a bridge across which we could set out for perilous realms and yet return safely with some of the beauty we found there.
My first and last philosophy, that which I believe in with unbroken certainty, I learnt in the nursery. I generally learnt it from a nurse, that is, from the solemn and star-appointed priestess at once of democracy and tradition. The things I believed most then, the things I believe most now, are the things called fairy tales.
We live in a moment that's unlike any other moment, a moment of bizarre tyranny, a moment of overreach.
I was nearly torn apart by a crazy doctor.
A moment of fear. It's like, and how are we living? How are we standing up in this moment?
I was made a slave by a bunch of mangy pirates.
Are we full of joy? Like, are we characters who are full of joy and unafraid?
I'm eaten. Got that? Eaten by a fire-breathing dragon. And not to mention being tossed, squashed, and scared practically to death.
It's like, how do we image God in this particular narrative in which we've been placed, in this chapter? And we get trained for that by reading about Sam and Frodo and Aragorn and Gandalf, and reading, Charlotte's Web and Animal Farm, and reading about Prince Caspian. Like, when you're little, you read those things and you read stories when you're older, and it reinforces what is the courageous action of a character in this moment.
Yet you stand before me.
Well, yeah.
Think, boy. What kind of an adventure would you have had if I brought you here with a turn of the page?
I wept bitterly, and then I said to myself, when everything happens quite miserably, then He sends help. I have always read so. People must first of all suffer a great deal before they can bring anything to accomplishment.
God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by His Son, whom He has appointed heir of all things, through whom also He made the worlds.
For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves, groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body.
minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you'll find him. His father's sword he had girded on, and his wild harp slung behind him. God of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall praise thee. The minstrel fell, but the foeman's chain could not bring that proud soul under. The harp he loved ne'er spoke again, for he tore its cords asunder, and said, no chain shall sully thee, thou soul of love and bravery. Thy songs were made for the pure and free, they shall never sound in slavery. The chains upon the people came, and they gave away their freedom. No prophets left, they then grew lame, they accepted their false kingdom. But one young man saw the minstrel boy, and he took up the shredded strings, and with great love remade with joy the sacred tool for truth to sing.
So yeah, if you enjoyed the books, the movie is interesting. It's a very interesting piece of Disney history.
One word for it, yeah, definitely.
So, I'm gonna be leaning on you guys a lot for this one because you guys have read the books. I have not. I tried reading the first one a long time ago and had other cool things that I was into at the time and just haven't picked them up again. I'm going to at some point, but just haven't been able to yet. So, Eilonwy is the direct topic, but also by extension, the Prydain Chronicles. So, yeah, who wants to open us up with just thoughts?
Elon, go.
Well, no, just the question is, do we want to handle this? Do we want to handle it chronologically, or do we want to handle it in?
I don't know.
In our awkward memory, because I didn't remember. I remember liking the Black Cauldron as a kid. I didn't remember. Now that I watched back it, I was going, why did I like this? It wasn't bad exactly, but it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Very much in the same way that I look back on Snow White, and I'm looking at this going, there's no plot here. You know?
Snow White at least is important though.
Is it?
There is some importance to the Black Cauldron, but it's more internal to Disney, and there's a few specific large scale technological breakthroughs during that, which I'll get into later. But
look, if we're calling Snow White important the same way we're going to call Citizen Kane important, then I mean okay, but that doesn't mean it was good.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was good for animation at the time, but yeah.
Well, being good
doesn't
for
mean
a franchise doesn't mean, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So you had a comment you wanted to go, Alex. You go on Eilonwy.
Eilonwy is so much better in the books. First two. I read the first two. But she's so much better in the books than she is in the movie. She's the only good part of the first book, in my humble opinion.
Well, you had a colored view. You had just been reading Fellowship.
I had just been reading Fellowship.
You had just been reading Fellowship, and
yes,
while Tolkien's language is difficult for modern audiences now, if
Mhm.
you have the capacity to read and enjoy it, it's going to be really hard coming off the back of that.
Yeah, it also felt like the book moved so fast after Fellowship.
Well,
Because
yeah.
Fellowship takes its time, and you get to know all the characters, and all of the characters are enjoyable. Like, none of them are bad. Even Boromir, who's like the, antagonist in certain places, isn't a bad character, and you get to know them and all that type of stuff. Book of the Three just went right after another. Just point plot, all of that. It moved fast. And it was, yeah, kind of a shock. Well, looking back at it and remembering it, it is a lot better than I was giving it credit for while I was reading it. But yeah, the first one is still not great. The second one's actually really good, though. I thoroughly enjoyed the second one.
So did you watch the Disney version recently?
Yeah, I watched it like yesterday, day before.
Yeah, I
that.
watched it yesterday too. I was just wondering because I vaguely remember listening to the Chronicle of Prydain, the first one. I think it was the first one.
Mhm.
And when they come upon the witches, and I distinctly
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking as I was listening to it, wow, this is really different than from the Disney movie.
Mhm.
Is that
Yes.
correct? Was I correct in that?
That is
okay.
Absolutely correct. That is
Yeah.
absolutely 100% correct. The witches are so much more interesting. The books are good, way, way better than the movie. But the witches exude this absolute vibe of grandmothers who have achieved ultimate power and can now do all of the knitting that they want. They don't need you.
Yes.
They don't need anything that you have.
Yes.
But if you can help them, then sure, they're willing to help you. But they don't need anything. They're just completely disinterested, and it's lovely.
Yes, I do remember that now that you say that. Yes, that vibe was very much there.
It's so good.
I will defend Disney's Black Cauldron in terms of what they were trying to do in terms of plot versus the limitations of the technology at the time. And by that I mean I'm not going to defend their story-making decisions necessarily, but except for when you are trying to cram this much book into this much screen time, because this is all you can afford to make when you need this much screen time. I would love if Disney would get their heads out of their back ends. I would love for them to do, or no, not them, DreamWorks. I would love for DreamWorks to get their hands on the Chronicles of Prydain and remake the Black Cauldron with modern technology and modern animation skill tools so that you could go longer than 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Give you more time.
Yeah. I think that there is something there. Because, as I said, looking back on the first book, and even while I was reading the second book, they're good books. They're actually really good examples of character arcs. Because at least Taran, as I said in the host chat, he's insufferable in the first book.
Oh, of course.
He was so bad.
He was insufferable in the actual movie.
Yeah, he is. But yeah, insufferable character, just not a good character. And by the end of the first book, he kind of becomes, he's trying to do the right thing, which is a good character arc. Then in the second book, he goes from trying to do the right thing to becoming a hero who ends up failing at being a hero. Like, he's trying to do the right thing, he's going on his quest, and he fails at the end of it. And somebody comes in, not Deus Ex Machina, but Tolkien, Eucatastrophe type thing. Comes in, everything is better. Actually really good. I'm really interested in seeing what the rest of his character arc is in the rest of the series, but in the first book and all of the movie, he's just so bad.
Well, I would argue that even in the movie, you've got the clearest character arc with him. You have hints at character arcs with the others, but it's very much obviously meant to be his story, and you can very much obviously see him develop. Even if you don't see the development happening, you can see the milestones, because they had to jump the development. So he goes from being ADHD fever dream boy who sees like himself in a pond to I'm going to actually be brave and like go into the castle to the first low point that he has when Eilonwy rescues him. He gets the sword, he gains power, he gets haughty off of that power, and he yells at Eilonwy, and they fight. But then they make up, like, immediately on the next scene. Whereas, like, with, you know, if we had time, we would have seen him wrestle with that, that girl's so silly, why? And then, but she's right, you know.
Yeah.
Like, so you see all the milestones for what he's doing, but then
you just don't see any of the actual things that cause him to grow.
Yeah, it's like, you know,
exactly. And unless I'm forgetting something, which I don't think I am, nobody else had character arcs in the book. Everybody else stays basically static. Like, everybody else is already where they are in the books. Which, I mean, kind of the topic is supposed to be Eilonwy. Eilonwy is so good in the books. She's so good. She's a non-entity in the movie. Like, she has very little character at all in the movie. In the books, she is exceedingly sassy, but very confident in, yes, I'm the princess, yes, I know what I'm doing, 12-year-old girl. And she feels exactly like that.
You get a little bit of that sass in the beginning. You get a little bit of the movie. You get a little bit of her girlness after the argument, where she is crying and then she tries to, like, you know, pull herself together, you know, because she's the princess. Really quick, sorry, tangent, non sequitur.
Yeah.
The king, the Horned King. I almost called him the Thorned King. The Horned King calls her a scullery maid. And I couldn't remember in the book if she was actually a princess or if she was just pretending to be a princess and was secretly a scullery maid. I couldn't remember.
That's one of those cool things about the movie, is that you can see that there were previous drafts of the script and they didn't make sure that everything was consistent inside of the one draft.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because in the books, what happens is, in the first book spans basically Terran trying to kill the Horned King, because the Horned King is not the big bad. The big bad is some guy whose name starts with an A sound. I don't remember what his name is, but he's trying to kill the Horned King. Goes through the entire book. What?
Andy.
It is not Andy, unfortunately.
We're calling him Andy.
Is Andy. He's trying to kill. He's trying to kill the Horned King, who's the servant of Andy.
Okay.
And ends up meeting Eilonwy after he is captured in the castle. And the oracular pig is, I don't believe she's ever captured at all. She just escapes, and they're trying to find her for the rest of it.
I love the phrase, "Is this your? Are you the servant of this? Or are you the keeper of this oracular pig?"
It's such a good phrase.
I'm using the phrase oracular pig from now on. Anyway, continue.
Yes, exactly. But Eilonwy finds him, throws a ball. Like,
now I want to create a band. Hold on. I want to create a band called the Oracular Pigs. Anyway.
What type of music do they do?
I am not sure yet. Some kind of medieval metal.
Hard rock to metal.
Yeah.
And it is all based out of the prophecies of Daniel.
In their
The
messes.
oracular pigs.
Anyway.
So multiple, yes. Where were we?
So she throws the ball into his cage, or into his cell, and like talks to him. Says, "Oh, there's somebody else who's been captured as well." He says, "Go free my friend." Who there's an entire character that gets Gwydion, who's like this super honorable knight prince character, who adds a lot to the books, and is gone from the movie. It's not a good adaptation, but they escape. Eilonwy finds the sword. Not Taran. Eilonwy finds the sword. Taran grabs just some random sword off of a like burial mound or something. They run out. The castle gets destroyed. They end up going to the end. The Horn King is defeated whenever Taran unsheathes the sword, and the sword powerful causes just sheathing of it causes the Horn King to disappear into mist. Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Taran almost dies because he unsheathed the sword and he's not of royal blood. So Eilonwy gives the sword to Gwydion, who is not dead, and that's the end of the first book. Eilonwy goes to back to the castle of the guy, I'm not remembering his name, that Taran was working with. No, the guy that Taran was working with. Dowan? Is it Dowan? Yeah.
I think so.
Goes to
Dolben.
Dolben. Yeah. Dolben. Yeah. She goes back to the castle of Dolben with Taran, and they are there. Dolben doesn't have any staff beyond the keeper of the oracular pig and the assistant pig keeper, Taran. So she ends up basically helping everybody around the castle and kind of taking on the role of cook in the castle. As, you know, it works for that. And then they go on the story of book 2. The king, Andy, ends up sending his people to Castle Dolben, and seeing that she is the kind of maid cook type person, and calls her a scullery maid. And that's where they got that. So, no, she's actually just a princess. She was in training to become a witch, but she is a princess.
Hence her bauble or her pokeball that she keeps throwing at people.
Yeah. But as I said, in the movie, or in the book, that is literally just a ball that lights up. That's it. It's just a light up ball.
So do we have more on this part, or do we move on to some of the horrible, like, behind the scenes nonsense from this movie and stuff that turned out good from the movie as a result, even though there's not a whole lot?
Well, I mean, I think that we can circle back, but I think it's important to get this
okay, cool.
portion that you're talking about.
But before we jump into the trench of the Black Cauldron's production, let us first take a break and thank our friends and sponsors. Attention all Christian writers and creative peoples! Are you searching for a place to share your work and receive encouragement from fellow wordsmiths? Look no further than the Broodcast. Inspired by the legendary Inklings of old, a group of writers who banded together during the Second Great War. The Broodcast is your monthly gathering for inspiration, fellowship, and critique. Join us as we share our stories and support our fellow soldiers on our creative missions. Enlist in the Broodcast community today at joshuadavidling.com/brood. Travel cyberspace. Serve the greatest cause. Join the ranks of the Brood today.
Imagine if you had everything Tolkien ever wrote. Well, you can't have his, but you can have mine. The Ling Lyricanium is $10 a month, and you can find it at joshuadavidling.com/LL. That's joshuadavidling.com/LL.
Are you looking for thought-provoking Christian perspectives that bring unity across denominations? Then you'll want to check out Logosophia magazine. As a free online interdenominational publication, Logosophia publishes a variety of creative works like articles, stories, and poems on different theological themes each quarter. Their goal is to have respectful conversations that highlight our shared beliefs outlined in the Apostles', Nicene, and Athanasian creeds. as we clarify our differences. So if you want to dive deeper into your faith while learning from other Christian expressions, subscribe to Logosophia magazine today on their website or listen to their podcasts. We look forward to journeying with you.
And now we relive one of the worst wars in animation history, the Black Cauldron's production.
Behind the scenes. I think it's important to get to the behind the scenes
Okay.
so that we
can come back around. Cool.
We can come back around.
Yeah.
So here's
we can come back and appreciate what little story later.
I'm just going to run through some facts just straight off Wikipedia because I've read these many times. I know a lot of these, but I want to get facts right and whatever else for you guys as best as we can anyway with Wikipedia. But so John Musker was the initial director, and they had offered the position by product. He was sorry. Okay. So he said the older people I was working with didn't like any of my ideas at the time, and so he basically stepped down from that. And then Hale became producer, and it says he tossed out visual character artwork submitted by Tim Burton at the time, because Tim Burton was working for Disney during that portion. As well as Don Bluth, who later comes into the story. But yes, they had tons of amazing talent there, and nobody wanted to listen to the young bucks. This was basically what was going on at the time. So both directors brought Milt Kahl out of retirement to create new character designs for Taryn, Eilonwy, Fluter Flam, and the other principal characters. Hale and the story team, including two story artists, David Jonas and Al Wilson, heavily revised the film, by which they capsulized the stories from the first two books. They also made some considerable changes, which led to Ceson's departure. I don't know, as she developed creative differences with Hale and the director. So a lot of people coming and going in the very, very beginning of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Animators John Musker and Ron Clements, also citing creative differences, were removed from the project and began development on The Great Mouse Detective. Displeased with Jerry's...
Great movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Horrible name. It should have been Basil of Baker Street, but good gracious, what a movie.
Great movie.
Any which way. Displeased with Jerry's concept for the Horned King, Hale turned the Horned King into a thin creature donning a hood and carrying a spectral presence with shadowed face and glowing red eyes. His role was then expanded into a composite villain of several characters from the book. Taryn and Eilonwy eventually acquired elements of the past designs and costumes of earlier Disney characters, especially the latter, who was drawn to resemble Princess Aurora specifically, because they wanted her more on brand. All right, here's some fun casting stuff. According to Musker, Gary Berghoff of MASH, Radar, had auditioned as Gurgi. He tried numerous vocal iterations since Ted Berman had no idea how the character should sound. After 3 hours, the directors grew frustrated, and Berghoff, who had refused to leave, was thrown out of the studio. By 1982, John Berner, an impressionist, had been cast in the part. So he does the Gurgi voice, which is a great voice for cartoons. Like, it's just goofy, silly kids thing. Kids love it.
I was wondering, honestly, because I listened to an extra about The Lord of the Rings, and Andy Serkis described his process for getting Gollum's voice. I wondered if he was influenced by Gurgi.
Yeah, he might have been. Yeah,
because as I was listening to Gurgi, I'm like, this just sounds like Andy Serkis's Gollum.
It sounds like a cute version of Andy Serkis's Gollum with all the edge taken off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like if you did Orko from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. It's Orko meets Gollum.
Kind of.
Anyway, in January 1981, Haley Mills was stated that she was being considered for the voice of Eilonwy. That same year, Mills hosted an episode of Disney's Wonderful World, in which she met Hale and discussed the part. So they actually talked about that some on TV, apparently. But yeah. Anyway, the role of... so then testing and editing. This is where it gets really fun with Katzenberg coming in and all the other good stuff.
No, Katzenberg hasn't made anything good.
Exactly. Shortly before the film's initial planned 1984 theatrical release, a test screening for the rough cut of The Black Cauldron was held at the studio's private theater in Burbank, California. After the film, particularly the climactic Cauldron-born sequence, proved to be too intense and disturbing for children in the audience, the newly appointed Disney studio chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg ordered certain scenes from The Black Cauldron be cut as a result of the length and the fear of their nature would alienate children. Since animated films were generally edited in storyboard form using Leica reels, later known as animatics, storyboards shot sequentially and set to temporary audio tracks, producer Joel Hale objected to Katzenberg's demands. Katzenberg responded by having the film brought into an edit bay and editing the film himself. One of the biggest turning points in all of Disney, because it completely alienated all the animators who had worked so incredibly hard on this that you're literally just going to leave it on a cutting room floor. Informed of what Katzenberg was doing by Hale, the newly appointed Disney CEO Michael... Whoa, hello, Brendan.
That was weird.
That was weird.
Did Discord die?
I don't know. Discord did not die. I just suddenly left the call.
That's weird. Okay, you're back.
It was the demons again.
It's the Horned King. He's looking for the oracular pig.
Anyway.
Yes.
Anyway, and he's not sure how Discord works.
I now want to redo all of the Horned King's lines, which honestly I think the voice actor for the Horned King.
Oh, fantastic!
But I now want to read.
It's John Hurt.
Yeah, it's John Hurt. Yeah.
I want to redo all of them as Emperor Palpatine.
There you go.
No, I want John Hurt to come in and do Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, for real. Good gracious.
There we go.
That's what we need.
That is.
We need the same guy who says oracular pig to say. Have I ever told you the tragedy of dark plagues
the wise
and his oracular pig?
This is why we're not.
Okay, that's the project for AI. Whenever AI becomes better than it currently is, just replace all of Palpatine's lines with all of the direct objects of it with oracular pig.
There you go. Oh my goodness. All right, so informed of what Katzenberg was doing by Hale, the newly appointed Disney CEO Michael Eisner called Katzenberg in the editing room and convinced him to stop. Though he did what Eisner insisted, Katzenberg requested that the film be modified and delayed its scheduled Christmas 1984 release to July 1985 so that the film could be reworked. The film was ultimately cut by 12 minutes, with existing scenes rewritten and reanimated for continuity. Many of the deleted scenes involved extended character interactions, but other edits involved violent content, including the undead Cauldron-born, who are used as the Horned King's army in the film's final act. Most of the scenes were seamlessly removed from the film. The Cauldron-born sequence contains rather recognizable lapses because the removal of the scenes of the Cauldron-born mauling the henchmen, as well as one of them being dissolved by the mist, creates a jump in the film's soundtrack. So they hacked it up bad.
Wow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, I'm interested. Well, I'm interested in that character interaction thing.
Right. A lot of that stuff's actually been lost too,
Because you mentioned that Taryn's the only one who has a character arc. Well, in the movie, that whole step thing in the movie, there's one other. There's two other people who have character arcs, sort of. Gurgi and Fluter. Because at the end, it's Fluter who steps up and basically gets the witches to make a bargain. Because they're about to just take the cauldron and be on their way. And he goes, hold on. That's not how we play this game. You did this with us. We're doing it to you.
Imagine if he went by D&D rules and actually rolled to seduce the witches. Just saying. Anyway.
No. I know the joke is that bards are the seducers, but you don't have to be a bard and
I
a
know,
seducer.
I know. Well, you also don't have to be a ridiculous fop like Fluter either, but, so, anyway.
Well,
Fluter is really good in the books, too.
Mm-hmm.
He's really great. He's like the rightful king of an extremely small kingdom who just decided, nah, I'm gonna go make music with this magical harp that breaks every time I lie. It's really good.
Yes.
And going back to this, and we'll finish this out. So this is some of the technology that was brought in, invented by David W. Spencer for this film, for the studio's still camera department. The animation photo process, APT, was first used for the Black Cauldron, which would enhance the technology by which the rough animation would be processed onto celluloid. First, the rough animation would be photographed onto high contrast lithographic film, and the resulting negative would be copied onto plastic cell sheets that would transfer lines and the colors, which eventually eliminated the hand inking process. However, as the APT transferred, line art would fade off the cells over time. Most of the film's animation was done using the xerographic process, xerography, which had been used by Disney since the late 1950s. Spencer would win a Technical Academy Award for this process, but the computer would soon render the APT process obsolete. Also, the Black Cauldron is notable for being Disney's first animation film to incorporate computer-generated imagery in its animation for Bubbles, a boat, a floating orb of light, and the cauldron itself. Though The Black Cauldron was released a year before The Great Mouse Detective, both films were in production simultaneously for some time, and the computer graphics for the latter were done first. When producer Joel Hale heard what was being done, the possibilities made him excited, and he made the crew from The Great Mouse Detective project create some computer animation for his own film. For other effects, animator Don Paul used live-action footage of dry ice mists to create the steam and smoke coming out of the cauldron. So, some really cool, they were breaking the mold, even though their film was getting chopped to shreds. You know what I mean? They were really pushing the envelope on that kind of stuff because no one would let them push it on the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the orb was the one thing that I caught from there that was like, oh yeah, that's the CGI.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that's interesting, because to use a term that you used a while back, kickflippy.
Yes.
It's just moving around and shadowing, sending shadows everywhere, and you can watch it. I'm like, that's interesting. That's cool.
I never used that on Poets at War. Explain kickflippy.
Oh, so we've been talking a lot about the movie Steve Jobs, which is a fantastic movie. There's a fair bit of language in it, so don't watch it with kids, all that fun stuff, but it's so good. It's one of my favorites. But kickflippy is whenever... What?
Apple fanboy.
Apple fanboy, absolutely. It's a great film on its own, though, and has nothing to do with Apple.
I'm poking you. It's okay.
Do something. But there's a scene in the movie where two people are arguing, and it cuts back and forth between them having one argument at present time and one argument 4 years previously. And it cuts back and forth again and again and again and again. It's beautiful. It's incredibly well shot. It is technically marvelous. Joshua is of the opinion that it takes away from the gravity of the scene because it cuts back and forth too much. It's doing something just for the sake of doing it instead of doing it for the purpose of to benefit the story.
Right.
It's kick flippy instead of something that's purely
my specific thing
that's like actually pushing the thing forward.
My specific reason for calling it kick flippy is the fact that you cannot get the full. You cannot appreciate the full dialogue of both scenes in parallel. The way it is cut in a linear or one-time way. You have to watch it multiple times. And while that can work, and I'm saying this was extremely well executed overall for what they were trying to do, I believe that it took away from the story because I could not appreciate it as a single one time through sort of thing. And it wasn't just that there's extra stuff in there. Like, there was stuff that I missed that I had to pause and go back and watch because I would not have understand what actually happened. Right? It's not just that there's extra stuff and something's better because you get to watch it multiple times and get new extra stuff. It was like I could not understand the scene the first time through.
Because of the way that it was shot, the way it was edited.
Right.
Personally, I didn't experience that. I got it on the first time through, but also I like that's the type of stuff that I enjoy. I'm a filmmaker.
Right.
Mind. So yeah. Yep. But all that to say, the orb flying around in front of people and behind them and casting shit there was like, ooh, they're doing that specifically because they can. And it works. I thought they worked really well. It's much less strong than the job scene, but it's still kick flippy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, but as a animator filmmaker thing, you need to have kick flippy scenes.
Yes, absolutely.
As a storyteller, you don't need them. As an animator, you do.
Yes.
Because you want to get more jobs.
Yes.
It's why every action movie, or let me rephrase, it's why there was like a time frame when every action scene had an insane one take. Where it looks like the camera doesn't cut at all. Like there are no cuts. It looks like there isn't a cut. There is a cut, but those are usually can also be called oneers. But one take, one same thing. The idea is it's supposed to be all 1/8, and the reason why. Because for a while, every action scene, they thought, oh, this is how we get people's attention. But oneers can further the story. Steven Spielberg is a master at this. There's a oneer in Jaws. And no one necessarily notices it. Because he doesn't want you to. Right. He's just using it as a way of moving the story along. So the fact that the bauble was kick flippy, I mean, maybe, but I didn't notice it was kick flippy. I didn't know that the bauble was the first thing of computer generation in terms of that. Like, and how did that computer generation look? I don't know. How does computer generation look when you're dealing with celluloid, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how. Like, I know how it works now because all animation goes through computers. It's like, okay, this is easy for me to understand. It's not as easy for me to understand when you actually have film reels still. But yeah, the tech was the fact that they were pushing on Black Cauldron doesn't surprise me. It's impressive. It's an impressive thing. There are some elements actually that were kind of sloppy. For example, in the very first scene, I noticed an error. It starts off after you get the prologue, which sounded like it was being read by a mixture of Anthony Hopkins and Sean Connery. You get this scene of Dolben's hut, and it starts at far away, and then it zooms in, and you have this parallax that happens where you have the background, which is the hut and the hill. You have a tree in the midground, and then another tree in the foreground. The tree in the midground moves before the tree in the foreground moves for the camera angle.
I need to go back and watch that.
Is it movie breaking? No, but I noticed it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it might not have moved before exactly, but it moved wrong, is what I'm saying.
And that's the multi-plane camera. Yeah, they were, that was developed for Pinocchio. The multi-plane camera. So they've had that for a long time, and yes, it was a little bit lazy not getting that 100%, but it's like they've used that for years and years and years.
But then there was like a scene where Taryn and Eilonwy, you had a close up of both of their faces, and they were like, it was like this really slow surprise look, and there you can see kind of the drawing and the sketch. That was just funny to me. That's not a wrong thing. That was their directorial choice, but I thought it was a funny choice. Yeah. But yeah, the hacking up, going into the fine, I'll do it myself and cut it up. Guy. Yeah,
Jeffrey Katzenberg is real life Thanos.
And I take it back. There were people who left during that time to go join Don Bluth, but Don Bluth left because of the Fox and the Hound. So, anyway. I'll pause 1 sec. What's up?
Yeah.
Mama has not come out yet, but it's not quite your bedtime. You have about 10 minutes.
I haven't seen Fox and the Hound, I don't think.
I have
I have not seen Fox and the Hound either.
Y'all both need to see it. Anyway, I'll tell you why in a minute. All right.
I watched a video on the creation of it. Supposedly, it started off as an adaptation of a different book, and it still is an adaptation of a different book, but they couldn't get the rights to that book, so they just bought the rights to The Fox and the Hound, and said, "Oh, this is our adaptation of this." And it's nothing like Fox and the Hound, but it's exactly like the other book.
Yeah, pretty much.
What was the other book of Mice and Men? Because I hear The Fox and the Hound is super depressing.
It's depressing because the whole thing
I can go find it.
The whole thing is a life sucks and then you die. What do you call it? Allegory about racism.
Yeah.
So there's good stuff in it. And it is the three movies that were particularly mess you up and made Don Bluth leave and all kinds of other crazy stuff happen were The Black Cauldron, The Rescuers, and The Fox and the Hound. The Rescuers, one of the biggest issues that they were having during that was little things where they were these young bucks and the 9 old men, or not all 9, but the ones who were still around, all were going, "What are you doing?" When they were told, when they told the not the ink and paint, but whoever was doing, it may have been ink and paint at that point, I'm not sure, but whoever was doing the coloration was told not to color in the eyes of the mice, not to color them white, because it would save time. Yeah. So that made a lot of people really mad. The Rescuers still has some good stuff in it and should definitely be watched. All the films from this period, you can see artists trying to push through. And that's why I feel like when we come back and we look at all the woke nonsense of this time, from whenever Disney gets through what they're getting through, regardless of what's going to happen, because their IP is too valuable for them to just float off into Never Never Land. However they get through it, going back to this time period and actually looking at it from that perspective, from looking for what was trying to shine through, is going to be really interesting. We're not far enough removed from it, but I'm interested because this is definitely, a lot of people would say the 2000s up until maybe Meet the Robinsons. For some people, some people go further, that was the second dark age. I don't think it was long enough. We're in the second dark age for real.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
But
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm the weirdo who thinks that Tangled was good. And
Tangled was great. That's not weird.
Everybody thinks that.
Actually thinks that Frozen was decent.
Frozen was decent, yes.
And Frozen 2. Also.
Frozen 2 was decent. It has some had more issues than Frozen 1. But yeah.
Issues from what? A storytelling perspective or
issues
from perspective?
Well, a lot of people want to point to the messaging, and I would say yes, but that's the least of its problems because
I don't know what messaging they're talking about.
Okay, the indigenous people hate are pure victims of the white people, Anyway, that's what they have issue with. And sure, fine, whatever, but like that's really minor compared to the story issues that we have of your protagonist being called by some kind of force that like there's literally the whole movie is about we don't know how to write a movie. like I'm not even joking. The whole movie starts out, and that's just turning into the Frozen 2 podcast, but I'll get it really quickly here. We'll get to that when we get to it for sure. But like, it basically is like we never thought we were going to do a Frozen 2, right? We never thought we were going to. We never thought we were going to do a Frozen 2. So what are we going to do? And Elsa feels something calling her. Oh, okay. That's not a plot. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's supposed to be... Oh, there it goes.
Uh-oh, it appears the Horned King is trying to remove us from the trenches, but we'll be back on Poets at War. This is a public service announcement for listeners and followers of Poets at War. Confess your sins and follow on Christ. Do not wait. The enemy takes every opportunity to turn you toward his side and destruction. Always remember, when it comes to your own heart and soul, clean is good.
I'm Ian Wilson, and I create graphic art using primarily traditional methods, supplementing with digital where it's needed. I use a real pen, a real paper, a real graphite to make my art. I like to feel my art. I've always been this way. I love the feeling of a pen or pencil in my hand, the sound of graphite scratching paper, and I love the sight of a nice black line making its way across the page. So why choose traditional art over digital? Traditional art has an organic, natural quality that seems to be missing from most digital illustrations. The illustrated books and comics that were made in the days before digital have an excellence and staying power that is just as vibrant now as it was decades ago. These are the stories that stay with you. Dr. Seuss, Winnie the Pooh, Where the Wild Things Are. People still read these. I'm currently working on my own graphic novel series, Legend of the Swordbearer, and I've also had the privilege to draw graphics for 2 motion comic series, along with illustrations for a small magazine, Logosophia magazine, and various book covers. Don't let traditional art fade into the dust. Help me keep it alive. You won't regret it. Visit my website at ianthomaswilson.com for more info.
We now return you to our war meeting in the trenches on Poets at War.
Have the gremlins been satisfied? All 3 of us have disconnected.
Apparently, what is very important.
I disagree with the we don't have that. That's not a plot.
It's an instigation that carries on through 3/4 of the movie till you actually have a resolution. And the way they resolved it was clever.
Yeah.
But basically, getting there, there's no direction whatsoever. No one knows what they're doing until that moment. Like, nobody. They're just doing stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's a...
They're trying to make it as a mystery, but there's no mystery. They're not investigating.
But they are.
But they aren't, because they're not looking for stuff. They're stumbling into everything. Anyway,
We're missing...
Table that.
Table.
By the way, the guy who did the prologue was John Huston.
John Huston.
I know that name.
It says he is American film director, screenwriter, and actor. He wrote screenplays for most of the 37 feature films he directed. Let's see. The Treasure of Sierra Madre, Key Largo, The African Queen, Moulin Rouge.
I know him because of Chinatown.
Yeah.
So, I've heard his name used in connection to Chinatown. That's it.
Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Apparently, he also voiced the wizard, Gandalf the Wizard, in The Hobbit 1977.
Oh. Okay.
That explains why he sounded familiar.
Yeah. Apparently, he's the father of Angelica Houston as well, who you guys know as... she was in the 90s Addams Family as Morticia, I believe.
Old
Yeah,
you assume that I watched the 90s
I
Adam's
definitely
Family.
that's definitely how I know her from. I don't know her.
Anyway, she's been in a lot of stuff, and she usually plays some kind of witchy character. Anyway, so yeah, that's what we've got for that. I wanted to mention Don Bluth. He left during Fox and the Hound, but I wanted to bring him up because during the time they started around the same time, so no one was copying anyone. But have you guys seen Dragon's Lair, the video game?
No.
Look it up on Google Images. You may recognize it. Dragon's Lair was the first of its kind for the most part in arcades. It was essentially, like a DVD game where you're like timing real-time events. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
You've played those sorts of like track games where there's like real animation going on and you have to press left or right or up and at the proper time.
Yes, I have heard about this.
And so this was in 1983, 1984 when it came out. So it came out around the time that Black Cauldron was supposed to come out. And this was Don Bluth's major project. He was the main animator on this thing and the designer and all that other kind of stuff.
You can tell.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It's an absolutely gorgeous game. It's hard to play. Like the timing of the windows are so ridiculously tiny, but like you can see the whole thing on YouTube now. And it was interesting because even though like a lot of kids played this game, the female that you save at the end is particularly busty and sexualized. And so like most kids never saw her though. So, outside of a save me really quickly. So like this, I feel like even though they kind of began production around the same time, which was also around the time he left, this is him saying, I'm going to take the sword and sorcery thing that's so big right now and run with it in a completely different direction. Because Disney is not interested in innovation whatsoever. And this to me, like just the feel of it, even though there's very little story, it's literally just go save the girl. Like the animation and the personality of Dragon's Lair versus Black Cauldron, there's no contest. So what are you saying, Brendan?
There's this article from People's Magazine, published March 30th, 2020. Ryan Reynolds to star in Netflix film adaptation of iconic 80s video game Dragon's Lair. Now this is back in 2020. So I don't know. This is just the one thing, but I was just like, is speaking of people not being creative.
Ryan Reynolds is Dirk the Daring. That's the guy's name, by the way, Dirk the Daring.
Dirk the Daring.
That does sound like a Ryan Reynolds protagonist, though.
It does.
It does.
Like we have to be fair. That sounds like
that does. So the obviously we're poets at war. Yeah, we can talk about the tech stuff, but not any of us have enough animation experience to really speak to that. So I guess what we should focus and what we wanted to focus on originally with the problems plaguing production was the, how do I phrase it? Was the story and and how it got like various iterations and how it got butchered and stuff. I think that having the Black Cauldron not be for kids, or let me rephrase. I think that the fact that the Black Cauldron's like animation, like there were violent scenes and things like that, I think that was a I just wonder how much of that was their hands were tied because of laws put into place limiting animation, right? I wonder how much of that was that there. But even beyond that, like, I wish that they had tried to stick with their guns so that animation wouldn't have been locked in to kid stuff.
Right.
Or kid safe stuff. Because with American animation, that locks you into kid-friendly things for so long that not if, when someone comes along to try to produce something that is not for kids, you get a sausage party.
Yep.
And
yeah,
that's not something any of us want to watch.
Right.
Yep.
I will say this. One of the things that is, I agree with everything you said. I don't know how much their hands were tied by laws and things, because Jeffrey Katzenberg has always been somewhat of a hypochondriac when it comes to audience reactions. He was always the person who would have has his group of kids come in, and friends of friends and whatever else come in and see a movie, and he would make drastic changes based on their littlest movements. One of the biggest things that they had to stand up to him on in The Little Mermaid, he wanted to cut entirely part of your world, because he said that the 2 and 3-year-old kids were getting restless.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just not a person you should have at the head.
Not at all.
Yeah. My favorite music YouTuber, whenever he talks about Katzenberg, he calls him the Katzenbutt. No, he's not a... It's amazing that Prince of Egypt turned out as well as it did whenever he was at kind of the helm of DreamWorks. It's an absolute miracle.
Well, given the subject matter of that film, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I know. I'm choosing my term very specifically. Actual miracle.
Yeah.
It's the embodiment of but the chart says people. He is the living embodiment of but the chart says.
Yeah.
Taken physical form and given head of a studio, given headship of a studio.
It's yeah.
So Eilonwy.
But hey, at least Quibi died.
Yeah, Quibi did die. I'm not against Quibi as a concept. The execution was terrible. But anyway, we'll get back to Quibi another time. Quibi, that's a draw. Anyway, Eilonwy, particularly Disney's interpretation of her.
Eilonwy.
I'm going to recuse myself because, as far as I'm concerned, she's a paper cutout.
Yeah.
Well, I can throw pot shots, but that's about it. You guys appear to actually have thoughts about the Disney version, though.
But everyone in the Disney version is a paper cutout. The only possible exception is Henwin, and that's because Henwin doesn't have lines. So all of her character has to be given through squeals and physicality.
Were there fairies in that?
Yes, there were.
Were they as annoying as they were in the film?
Not only were they not as annoying. Go.
I loved the fairies in the movie. I thought they were the best part. Excuse you.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm with Joshua. I think the fairies were kind of on the annoying side. They were not at all annoying in the book. They were dwarves and elves.
Okay.
They were dwarves and elves. They were the fair folk, and they lived underground. And the king ends up capturing them, like actually capturing them, and says, "Okay, why should we send?" He's a dwarf. Why should we send you back up to the realm? And he said, "Well, you just should." And he says, "Okay, we're not going to. We're going to lock you down here for at least 50 years. At least 50 years." And he's very bloviating. It's such a fun character, really good character. But definitely the best part, aside from Eilonwy, is a character.
I love the design of the fairies.
Of the first book.
I will say I like the design of the fairies, the pixies in the movie. I think their voices and their dialogue were insufferable.
I didn't have that issue with them at all. I thought they were the most interesting as far as characterization of characters.
That's the problem.
Everyone. Why is that a problem?
It's the problem because they're not the main characters.
But that's
But yes.
That's not a problem. You work the math backwards. Everybody else should be more
Yeah,
interesting.
okay.
They should not be interesting.
Yeah. It's if okay, so when you say they're the most annoying, you don't mean their characters are the most annoying. You mean the fact that, or you mean their inclusion and the way they were executed was the most annoying.
Yes, because I'm like, okay, look, here's an entirely different show.
Yeah. I thought Dolvin was hilarious.
Yes.
And that was great. I identified with Dolvin to a certain degree.
Once again,
do you have an oracular pig?
he suffers from the same problem as everybody else, though. Dolvin in the books is a narcoleptic. He's a narcoleptic prophet.
That's funny. That is funny.
He's so
an oracular.
good.
He's an oracular fairy. He is not an oracular.
He's so
pig.
good, though. It's
well, yeah. Like you have to remember, like the only thing I remembered about the books was that the three witches were nothing like the three witches in the movie.
Yeah.
The fact that was the thing, I knew going in that this is going to be like at best lip serve. Well, no, at best loosely based on, at worst a lip service to.
Yeah. And yeah.
So I thought. See, that's the thing. I enjoy a film while I'm watching it. Like, I'm a really good audience member, and so when I'm sitting there, like, yeah, there will be points when I'll be watching a movie and I'll go, that doesn't make sense. Why the heck are you doing that? But it's not, that doesn't make sense. Why did the writers write this way? Or why is this the best part? It's not like talking about this. It's in the scene, in the moment. Why are the characters acting like morons?
Yeah.
And Eilonwy, trying to get back to her, the fact that she's not who she is makes it really. Eilonwy is not who she is. The fact that she isn't the character from the book, I don't have that comparison. So sitting down, I thought there were good moments of characterization. They were just very disjointed.
Yeah.
And again, that same problem of depth. He is the brave. Like, I am breaking myself out. Do you want to come with character in the beginning? Then Taryn draws the sword and breaks the guy's axe. And he gets all giddy with adrenaline and, haha, I'm the hero. And then he's taken the lead and she just kind of follows him. And she points out but when they're arguing, she points out rightfully, that wasn't your skill, that was the sword. Which is correct.
But she's just a silly girl, Brendan.
But then...
and then she cries about it.
But then she cries. But that's a good thing, I think.
Okay.
Because she is a girl. She can have her feelings hurt, and she's not just this boss girl who wins the day all the time. I think it shows there is complexity to her. But then she gets over it, and then they meet Gurgi, and she's like, oh, she's cute, and that shows more of her girliness. And then they fall down into the fairy realm. It's like, oh, more of the girliness. Then they get up, and she stops being a character after that. She doesn't do much with the witches. She doesn't do much while tied up, and like the Black Cauldron's doing its thing, and then the movie's over.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's you have good moments of characterization in the beginning, establishing kind of who she is and kind of showing the intricacies of her character, that she does have maybe some insecurity, that she's brave and she has this leadership quality to her, but she also is a girl still.
So all the stuff that's wrong with her pretty much ties back to how the problems with the movie, more or less than her.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it flops because there was not enough time. There was not enough thing. Fluter himself also shows some hints of characterization where he's the one trying to get them to work together during the argument. Fluter's right. We need to work together. Fluter never said they have to work together.
Right.
The words never came out of his mouth because it probably got cut.
Yep.
Then he
By the
frogs
cat's
around literally with the witches.
Yeah.
Acts like a coward and is like saying, "Get us out of here! Help us! Help us! Hurry up!" Panicking right up until the very end, where he suddenly flips and is the one doing the bargaining, except that they have to have Terran do it because it's Terran was the one who made the original agreement, so he's the owner of the cauldron. Okay, that makes sense. I'm willing to let him do the final negotiations, but he's the one who, like, where does a coward get the chutzpah to say to a powerful witch, "Oh, chill out, woman," when she's like, "I love a man with who's authoritative." It's like, oh, like, cool your jets,
That
woman,
line
or something
killed
like.
me.
Yeah. It was like, where does that come from? You don't know, because that's the last bit of characterization that Fluter needed, and they just pull it out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know what we say about Eilonwy, because I don't know what her character is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
except from what Alex has said.
I can actually characterize her entire character in one quote that she had from the about 2/3 of the way through the second book. So, story's completely different from what it is in the movie. Basically, they got the cauldron from the witches and then lost the cauldron. That's all that you really need to know. Terran is throwing himself a pity party because, as I said, he's trying to become a hero and just failed at it. And he says, "Everybody was right. I guess I am just a pig boy." And Eilonwy, and I'm going to use try to use the voice that they use for that, says, "Oh, don't sell yourself short. You're not a pig boy. You're an assistant pig keeper. And yes, that amounts to pretty much the same thing, but still don't sell yourself short." That's her character.
Yeah.
She's witty and funny, and she's like peak 12-year-old girl. She's great.
If that's what a 12-year-old girl is like, then I'm going to fear for my life when one comes along in my family.
Peak 12-year-old girl. 12-year-old girl, like the platonic ideal of a 12-year-old girl.
Oh boy.
Just
So Hazel, even though she's 5.
great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Basically.
I can absolutely see Hazel doing this.
Yes.
But
Yes,
doing a lot of the stuff that Eilonwy does. But
Yeah.
she's a fantastic character. And as I said, she doesn't have a character arc because she's entirely confident in who she is.
Right.
But see, that may bug me if I were to read it through and just like, okay, why are you not changing? Why are you not?
At least in the first 2 books, she doesn't have a character arc. She is a supporting character because she's already gone through her character growth. Her parents shipped her off to a witch to learn to become a sorceress so that she could come back and help the kingdom, even though she doesn't want to because they're all terrible people. That's her character growth. Her character growth happened. I have a feeling she does get more character growth later on in the book, but yeah, she's already gotten to where this is by a character growth, and you can tell from the way it's written.
Well, I'd say overall, Disney's version was just a casualty of Katzenberg.
That's a great way to put that.
It's probably a casualty of Katzenberg, but I don't think that he could have completely, like, there still probably were issues with the script to begin with.
Right, but
Yeah,
you're
probably.
saying overall she was only mostly dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was only mostly dead.
And they were trying to adapt 2 books.
Yes.
That's the other thing. Compared to trying to adapt a fairy tale or trying to adapt a legend, they were trying to adapt 2 fully written, fully fleshed out books.
Yep.
In less time than the Lord of the Rings took to make 1.
Exactly. It was a tough feat. Now, Disney.
I was going to say, admittedly, Tolkien is substantially different from whoever wrote Prydain.
Lloyd Alexander.
Lloyd Alexander.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, Lloyd Alexander was pretty good. Okay. The Fellowship is drastically different from the first Prydain book in terms of depth and things like that. But even if we look at like how another comparison to like How to Train Your Dragon, I'm pretty sure the first movie was just one of the books. So
yeah,
and they still took more than 60 minutes to do it.
Yeah, I feel that if Disney was at its peak, like absolutely at its peak, no interference from the cats and butt or anything like that, they probably could have done it, and they probably could have done it justice.
Yeah.
As it was just a confluence of events, a massive undertaking that was undercut by a giant amount of studio interference, and that's never a good thing. And the cats and butt, yeah.
Well, everybody, be your family's bard, do not be a cats and butt. And we'll see you next time in the trenches on Poets at War. I don't know what I'm doing.
For more conversations like this with our 3 intrepid leaders, go to joshuadavidling.com and check out more of Poets at War.
God of songs said